Hey, it's Ted. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going to give you a quick tour of my automotive tools. Got a lot of stuff to show you today, so let's get cracking. So I keep probably 90% of all of my automotive tools here in my big tool chest, and I'm just going to go through a bunch of this stuff really fast. The majority of the stuff that I've got starts out in this little set of drawers right here because they're the quickest access for me when I am working on the car. So start you in. Set that to the side. Going through really fast, I'll start smallest to biggest. 1/4 inch socket or 1/4 inch ratchets. Got a little flex guy in here too, very handy. I can use this paired up with the pipe that I always keep handy for a good bit of leverage on my 1/4 inch stuff. Bunch of extensions. Can't have too many extensions, same with 3/8 as well. A couple of key things, make sure to get your up-down adapters, so your 3/8 to 1/4, so that's a down adapter, and then your up would be like your 1/4 to 3/8. Those things are really handy. Those are really handy. One thing of note, first of all, I've got metric and imperial. Don't even use the imperial, never have it. If you're starting out doing your own automotive work, I see no reason to get that stuff with the exception of your spark plug socket. So deep wells, 3/8 inch shallows. You can see that I've color coordinated all of my sizes here. So you think this is what, 13, 14, 15, 16 millimeter here is 16 millimeter there. And I don't have to read the numbers to see that, especially when stuff is lying around on the floor. You'll see that reflected throughout a bunch of the tool sets. It's something I've done recently. You know, got your universal swivels, both for 3/8 and 1/4 inches. Got that in the 1/2 inch sizes up above as well. Over here, I've got some 1/4 inch drive metric deep wall sockets. I've got my Torx head sockets here that I have not tape coated yet, and then below that I've got some Allen heads as well. One little side note, when you buy a kit of these Allen head sockets, I've never seen a kit that includes a little 5.5 millimeter, and man, I tell you, make sure to pick one of these guys up, even if you buy it individually like I did. The reason why is I stumbled around for years thinking that my 5 millimeter just didn't fit right. And really it was because I needed a 5.5 on several applications. So I've talked about these in another video. These are socket caps. These are really handy. You can plug these, you know, it's got the square drive that goes into the socket, and then you can turn your socket with an open end wrench or a box wrench, something like that. Pretty handy, little convenient thing. Yeah, so that's, use these a lot. Critical, essential tools, obviously. Next, into the open end wrenches. As you can see, I've got a whole bunch of open end wrenches. The essentials being your standard open end box, you know, combination wrench with, you know, open end wrench with a box wrench on the other side. You can see I've got these color coded as well. Again, going back to this would be our 16 millimeter, just knowing off of the color. I go all the way up to 21 millimeters because of suspension work and things like that. This is the set that I got initially with my little you know, my starter Craftsman set. Then I got some more because some of the stuff that I needed some duplicates for some brake work on my old Taurus SHO. And since then I've just filled in the others, buying onesies here and there. Got the minis as well. These can be handy at times. I've never actually bought a full set of stubbies. I've been interested in that. My flare nut wrenches, these I did not have for a long time, and you should, especially, you know, with your bleed valves on your brakes, you should really have these. If you're just starting out, these are going to really cover you. That's going to be great essential tools. If you get the money and you can splurge for them or buy them, get a good deal on a set. You know, these ratcheting box end wrenches are just a dream. But especially if you're buying them one at a time, they're about triple the price of a comparable wrench over here. So keep that in mind when you're budgeting things, but they are super handy. I actually go to these probably more than the ratchets now in some places, so that's something to do. Again, more Imperials that I don't really ever use except for household projects. Just your good old-fashioned adjustable wrench, you know. These are super great to have. Got to have a couple of those. Those are essential tools as well. Close that up. I'll go up to the top here. This is where I've got my 1/2-inch drive stuff. Don't use this stuff that much. Got a big flex head guy, you know, kind of breaker bar style wrench. You know, this is critical. I use this guy. I've got a 3-foot long pipe that I'll use if I'm having to break free like a big hub nut or something like that, because I have actually broken some of these 1/2-inch drives. I do use Craftsman. They're guaranteed forever, unconditionally guaranteed forever is what they say. Being an amateur, these have always done me right. When I did break this, I took it back. The guy swapped it in a second, no big deal. I know the pros like their snap-ons and their Mac tools, and from the reviews I've read, you know, the feel in the hand does make a difference for them, but not for me. So that's why I stick with Craftsman. Plus I've got Sears stores and Ace Hardware stores and Kmart stores around that I can do all my warranty exchanges at, so that's great. Got a couple of onesie big hub nuts over here, my metric stuff, my metric standard, my metric shallow well sockets here, 1/2-inch to 3/8, you know, the swivel. I've got a couple of big Allen heads here, hex heads. Got a ginormous 22 for my fork for my motorcycle, a couple of O2 sensors here, and again, extensions galore. I keep my 3/8-inch brace bit wrench, is that what you call that? Speed wrench in here as well. Little feeler gauges, there's going to be a time that you're going to need these, but you probably won't be surprised by the need, so you don't have to have those things stocked in your toolkit if you're just building up. But your big 3/8, big 1/2-inch drive, I would definitely get one of these. You know, the amount of extra length that you get on it, or just get a big ratcheting one of these. But these guys, you know, you can't break these. You can break the ratcheting mechanisms on this. You're not going to break that. So yeah, that's that stuff. On to screwdrivers, and I'm just trying to move this along really fast. I've got a ton of screwdrivers. Kind of moving along. Got a big drawer full of nut drivers. These were the colors that kind of I do use these pretty frequently, and this color pattern is actually what I use to establish my color coding for my sockets. Got a bunch of pliers. Let's pull these out and take a look at them. So this is everything out of that, all of those pliers that I pulled out. I'll go over everything really quickly. First thing, let me kind of point out that this black set of pliers here, you know, this dikes, diagonal cutting pliers, alignment, the needle nose, and this, what do you call these? Adjustable slot plier or something like that. And then these two little guys. These all came in a kit, probably maybe 20 bucks or something like that. And I have used the heck out of them. Gotten a lot of great mileage out of it. Only recently have I upgraded my dikes to a really nice set of Nipix clippers, which, you know, this whole thing costing, you know, let me say this whole set costing 20 bucks, this one guy costing 30. But this guy is really nice. If you do get the money, you get around to it, you can cut through nails with this guy and it'll just, you know, it won't flinch. It'll just keep on going, no problem. So that's something to kind of consider. The only reason why I upgraded my needle nose pliers, because I actually torqued on these so badly that the pivot is jacked up. So that's why I got a different set here. These right angle guys are great for helping to remove spring loaded hose clamps. Brian over Brian Mobiles 1 picked that recommendation up from him. Wish I had learned that 15 years ago. Let's kind of keep going through. The channel locks I use a lot. These are a little set of bolt cutters that I actually don't really use for automotive stuff. They were just in the drawer. Never really used the vice grips for anything. I've got a variety of different spring clip pliers. You know, these are probably the set that I use the most. They're this type. I've got a bunch of different tips for it as well. But you can actually flip these around to either be expanding or contracting style plier use, but I've got a variety of those. Those are handy. Got a pair of wire strippers that I keep specifically in my automotive toolkit so that I can keep my nice electronics ones in with my electronics. Another bigger set of slotted pliers. Hose clamp pliers. This is something I got just recently. I would recommend investing in a pair of these. Not necessarily this style. You can get like I think online you can get like a nylon set of hose clamp pliers for in that kind of $10-15 range. I think it's worth it. It's something I did not do right away, and if you're starting out, I would recommend doing that. You know, instead of using things like the vice grips to just hold on to things, I use these guys. These are like hemostats or clamps, surgical clamps. A friend of mine actually gave me this one for fishing, actually. We used to fish northern pike a lot out in Colorado, and these were just fantastic to be able to reach in, grab, and they've got a kind of a locking system on them up here. Grab onto the hook and pull out. Anyway, I use these all the time for things where I need to kind of like hold on to, like reach in, hold on to a bolt, start something weird like that. I've got a large set and a small set. So that I think really kind of covers all of the pliers. Okay, moving on, let's take a look at some of the other stuff. Let's go down to kind of all of this stuff is pretty like all automotive specific tools. We'll pull these out and take a look at these too.
Okay, so this is everything out of that drawer, and this is what I call my automotive specialty drawer because it's all stuff to work on cars or motorcycles. So to start off really quickly, got a pickup magnet for when you drop stuff, a mirror so you can find the stuff that you dropped, an old turkey baster, and actually, so this is valuable for doing stuff like removing old brake fluid out of a brake reservoir. It's great. This is a Borescope, so you turn it on. It's got a little camera that you can look around for stuff with. Rarely use this. Actually, got it for a household project, but it has come in handy. You can get them pretty cheap. I think this was maybe around $60. I'll put a link in the comments below. But it comes with little attachments too. So like it came with this little. See if you can see it. This little hook here. So like I dropped like a $30 O-ring one time. That was hidden down in the girlfriend's Passat and was able to get it out with that. This is just like a 2-jaw puller. I think I used this to be able to separate a tie rod end once or something like that. Just have that around. This is a chain alignment tool for aligning the motorcycle chain on the bike. You clamp this onto the rear sprocket, and then it helps you know how lined up the chain is. This is a little tester for your coolant. You can kind of see there are a bunch of little balls in there, and basically you suck up a little bit of coolant into here from your radiator, and based on the number of balls that float, it tells you to what temperature your coolant is good. So a little cheap thing, but very important, especially in your colder climates. Trim panel tools. These are cheap. These are like $5 or something like that for a little set. I've for forever I was just using screwdrivers, but these are such a step up, and for so cheap, really encourage you to pick these up as you build your toolkit up. Harmonic balancer puller. I haven't used this for years, needed it for my old Taurus SHO, but now that I've got it, I just kick it around. I think you can rent these from automotive parts stores, and I would suggest that you probably do that instead of buying it. I wasn't aware that you could do that at the time, so something to think about. This is a little seal tool. This is for pressing seals into place on motorcycle forks. Needed that for a project once. This is a radiator cap adapter for a radiator tester for my Subaru. So you can, as I've said before, you can rent a lot of tools for free from your parts store, but the trick is, in the old days, your radiator caps were all the same, but now a lot of cars are different, and I picked up this adapter to work for my Subaru. So I've got that kicking around. A couple of oil filter wrenches. I far prefer these over those old style metal band wrenches, but I just buy the sizes that I've needed for different cars. You know, thermometer gun. This is helpful for doing a lot of stuff. You know, for diagnosing catalytic converters. If you think like you've got a bad cat or maybe an O2 sensor, you can. There are some things that you can do to diagnose it with that. Another thing you can do is you can use these to help if you're suspecting that you have like a brake caliper or a frozen brake caliper or a bad wheel bearing. You know, drive the car. Once you're done driving, pull to the side of the road real quickly, run around, check the temperature of all four corners. If one of them is a lot higher than the others, you might know which wheel bearing, which brake caliper is going bad. Other stuff. Got an old multimeter. I've got a nicer one that I keep around for electronics work, but I keep this around for just doing basic car stuff. Don't mind if this guy gets dropped into the engine bay or kicked around or whatever, so I keep that around. This is disconnect tools. As you can see, I've never actually used it, but these were on my shopping wish list on Amazon, so one of the family members bought it for me just so that I kind of have these around, but I haven't needed them so far. But you know, use these for disconnecting fuel lines or AC lines. And then got a couple of kind of specialty things. These are these kind of crazy, I think they're like 12 point, let me see if I can show you. This is another set of them too. Really kind of crazy sockets. Like 12 star, they're like a Torx head but on steroids. And the Passat needs these actually for doing things like removing a CV joint, adjusting the door hinge clip or the door latch clip. That's actually why the girlfriend had these originally. So these were very Volkswagen specific, is the only reason why I've had them. Last two things, got a set of extension Allen heads or hex heads. Kind of wish I'd got these within the last couple of years. Again, these were on a wish list and got them. Kind of wish that I'd gotten these earlier, so that's some food for thought there. And then some crow's foot wrenches, metric crow's foot wrenches. I rarely need these, but man, once or so again, these were just kind of wish list items. But when I have used, you know, there have been times when they've come in handy, and when they did come in handy, they were fantastic for the specific purpose. So to kind of real quickly recap, you know, the stuff that if you were starting out, what do I think that you just gotta have? Gotta have the magnet, gotta have the mirror. The baster you'll probably get to pretty quickly as soon as you're doing brakes and flushing your brake lines and stuff like that. The coolant tester is critical. Obviously your oil filter wrenches. Then into the next nice to haves. Trim tools are super cheap. Totally encourage you to get those. The extension Allen wrenches. Wish I'd gotten these earlier. Crow's foot wrenches, maybe. So, and that's that drawer. One would be this. It's a little brush for your battery terminals, and this, you can kind of see there's a brush inside of there to do the terminal, and then you can pull this apart and you get another brush to be able to wire brush the clamps on your battery cables. So it's a cheap little thing, and definitely I think worth having to keep things going. This is actually a Nutcracker. I rarely use this. I think I've used this once. It's got a hardened splitter on one end, and then basically just crank this guy in until it snaps. I can't remember what I needed to use that on. I think it was something from my old Taurus, probably related to the struts, because that stuff just always rusted up horribly. Some brushes, you know, little brass wire brush, clean threads with, plastic wire brush too, kind of metal wire brush, I'll use on thread sometimes as well. But usually try to stick with the brass just to keep things together, especially when working on the aluminum. And then a quick little tap and handle. Just so you know, you can get the big tap kits, but if you need little onesies to clean something up or rethread something specifically, know that you can usually pick up a single tap as well and just the little handle. That kept me set for a long time before I got my big tap set, which I'll probably talk about in a different video. But that's kind of everything in that. I did have a couple of miscellaneous files in there that can be handy, but rarely use them for automotive stuff or any repairs. So hope this helps.
Great, now that we're done with that, we'll put that away. Let's talk about hammers really quickly. Out of my hammer drawer, ball peen hammer for hitting chisels and drifts. Sometimes you need to use a big kind of, I think they call that an engineer's hammer or something like that. Anyway, or a BFA, a big friendly helping hammer. Got that, got a variety of different drifts and some little chisels in here that can be pretty handy. Don't hammer on your screwdrivers. Get chisels, far safer. Same thing with the drifts. Don't hammer on your screwdrivers. Messes them up, breaks, they shatter, they blow up in your face. It's all terrible. Get a ball peen hammer. Don't use a claw hammer. Thing's gonna bounce back and crack your skull. Also, I use a dead blow hammer. I don't use a rubber mallet for anything, again, because of rebound. I was familiar with dead blow hammers from woodworking, so I went that way for automotive too. I keep one dedicated for automotive and one for woodworking. That way this can get all dirty and I don't have to worry about dirtying up my wood projects. Let's move on into air tools. Air tools, I really don't use much of I certainly don't use my impact wrench very much. Ever since I got my big, I got a 1/2-inch drive Ryobi cordless impact wrench. I use that a lot now, but actually back when I got into this, 20 years ago, the cordless stuff really wasn't that good. So but I'm so glad that I've got the air compressor, and I will use it for stuff like running my 1/4-inch ratchet, which is more of a convenience kind of thing in tight places. Got a cutoff wheel that I don't really use. The impact hammer can be super handy, not for the chisel, but it's got a drift bit that can be really handy in separating some suspension pieces. So that's something I think that can be an overlooked and valuable tool. Make sure to always oil your stuff, as well as nothing will kill an air tool faster than running dry. So make sure to do that. Also make sure to be using your impact rated sockets. Do not use your chrome vanadium stuff. That stuff's going to shatter in your face and blind you. So make sure to use your impact rated stuff. My stuff's cheap Campbell Hausfeld, but it's been holding up for 15 years. Again, I'm DIY. I'm not pro, so that could be the difference. So whatever works for you, and then a bunch of miscellaneous little, inflators and things like that. Okay, so we'll close this up. Let's jump down to this bottom drawer. What do we have here? I've got some woodworking stuff. I've got a hand vac pump that I've actually not yet used for any project. It was a wish list item that I ended up picking up. I know people use that for, vacuum leaks and a variety of different things. I still have yet to have a use for it myself. I use my smoke machine. You may have seen my other video on the smoke machine for finding vacuum leaks. This big Milwaukee drill is handy if I do have to drill something out. To be quite honest, out of all of my drills, my cordlesses, everything like that, if I were only allowed to have one drill for the rest of my life, it would be this guy. Super powerful, super controllable, and durable as all snot. So love that thing. If I had to be on a desert island with one drill, that would be it. Other things, I've got a couple of things down in here. I'll pull those out. Here we have a couple more things that I end up reaching
for on occasion. I'm working on cars. Big pry bar, number one, or not number one, but one thing that I definitely use, especially for separating suspension pieces and things like that. I've actually got 3 of these pry bars, and of differing sizes, this being the largest. The next showed you earlier probably, and that is my big pipe wrench extension, or big pipe extension for when I'm trying to break something loose with the big 1/2-inch drive. So that thing is handy. That's definitely great for removing hub nuts and things like that, like I mentioned before. Next thing, big chain wrench. This is fantastic for holding things like big crankshaft pulley. When doing the timing belt on Subarus, need to hold on to that crankshaft, so that's what I've had it for. This guy is a little on the pricey side. It's about $45, but I've used it several times on several timing belts now, so it certainly paid for itself. Spent a little bit money to get the longer handle version that I found on Amazon somewhere, I think, and it has worked fantastically, so that's been worth it. Then last thing here, big 1/2-inch drive torque wrench. Again, this was something that I wanted to have definitely for when doing things like timing belts, to be able to torque the bolt on the crankshaft pulley to the appropriate spec. And I actually sprung to get this guy because it goes up to 250 foot-pounds. So when I'm doing hub nuts, some hub nuts, I think, like on my Subaru, the hub nut is supposed to be torqued to something like 200 foot-pounds or 180 foot-pounds. So my beam style wouldn't even go up that high, and even the cheaper 1/2-inch drive wouldn't even go up that high. So being a guy who doesn't do those projects that frequently, and since it's easy to use something like this to try to put that kind of that pressure on there. Otherwise, if I didn't have that big torque wrench, I'd be using something like the pipe to try to torque that baby down, and it would be so easy to over torque that thing, strip the threads on the hub nut, or ruin the bearings, or any of those kinds of things. So been really happy having that. It was about $50. Let me talk about torque wrenches really quickly. You can see I've got all 3 ratcheting torque wrenches: 1/4 inch, 3/8, and 1/2 inch, and my 1/2 inch is even the one that goes all the way up to 250 foot-pounds of torque. All together, these constitute probably around $130 worth of torque wrenches, and they do a good job. Don't get me wrong, and they're great, and I'm glad that I have gotten them now that I've moved along. But for probably about 18 years of my work, I used this guy, and it's $16. If you're getting started in your work, do not let price be the obstacle in getting a good torque wrench and using it when you should. Spend the $16, use one of these. They're not as convenient, they don't ratchet. You can use your 1/2 inch to 3/8 adapter. Going all the way down to 1/4 inch, you're probably going to have trouble because the sensitivity just isn't there for these, but they do have beam style at 1/4 inch as well, which are very inexpensive, because this guy alone was $40. So, but make sure to be torquing your stuff. If you're an amateur, I would say that amateurs probably don't have as good of a feel as the pros do for being able to hand torque things just on the feel of your hand. Use the torque wrench. It'll help you get familiar with what you're really doing, especially if you're working with aluminum stuff. If you're working with putting steel bolts into aluminum cylinder blocks or cylinder heads or anything like that, please make sure to be using a torque wrench so that you do not strip that stuff out. It is worth the investment, especially when you can do it for $16 or something like that. If you end up with the money, go to these guys. The convenience of the ratcheting style you will be more inclined to reach for these than you will this. I'll be honest, it's true, that's why I finally did it. But just make sure that you are torquing your stuff to spec. I think you'll find that it's one thing that you can do as an amateur that will have the most professional impact on your repairs.
And we'll put that stuff back in, and then let's run under here. Let's talk about my jacks.
Okay, let me talk really quickly about the jacks that I use as well. This is the first jack that I bought, little hydraulic guy. I think it's got about a 10 to a 12 inch lift on it. This thing covered me for a long time. It's a very good jack, but I did eventually step up to this guy's 3.5 ton quick lifting thing. It's great, but I would say, in fact, it's too big. This, just the whole chassis on it is very heavy. I would like something a little bit smaller, but it's also been bomb-proof, right? It's nice because with this big guy, I can lift up the whole front end of the car, mounted in the center, and that kind of brings up another thing really quickly. Make sure to be using your jack stands when you're doing your work. You know, safety, safety, safety. Really do not, it is not safe for you to be doing your work on your car without it actually being mounted on jack stands. Do not work on it. You know, anything beyond just doing a quick tire change, you should not be doing that work while supported on the jacks themselves. Make sure to just throw the jack stands underneath it. You're going to be safer in the long run. And I've seen cars fall off of jacks before, and it is the scariest thing in the world. So, so yeah, I still keep the small jack around because it is helpful to be able to move suspension parts around and things like that. Like if I'm doing strut works, even with a car on the jack stands, I might need to lift up, you know, a swing arm, something like that. I use the small jack for that, and it's a lot smaller. It's convenient. I can work around it very easily and do things like that. So this has been a great setup. But this guy, you know, was great. It really covers everything you really need to do by and large. This guy was really just a big convenience buy.
Let me talk about really quickly some automotive-oriented chemicals that I keep on hand at all times. Obviously, I always keep a can of brake cleaner around. Even if I'm not doing brakes, I always make sure that I've got a can of brake cleaner around because it's just great for cleaning parts and things like that. Also keep a can of carburetor cleaner. Rarely have to use it, but always keep one around. Other couple little specialty things. This is mass airflow sensor cleaner. The little platinum wire in your mass airflow sensor should be cleaned on occasion. Definitely every time it's a smart thing to clean it every time you replace your air filter, so that way it gets a proper reading. Otherwise stuff builds up on the wire. It essentially insulates the wire, and the way that whole wire works is based on temperature. So that's something good to do and can help make sure that your car is running at the correct mileage, getting the right miles per gallon on your car. Battery terminal spray. This stuff helps to prevent your battery terminals from corroding. Other little things, little lubes that I use. I think you know, if you watch my spark plug video, little silicone lube is handy to have. This is really smart to spray, you know, like once a year, especially in the colder climates. Spray some of this onto a rag, rub it around the weather stripping on your car, and it will help to keep your door from freezing to the weather stripping and tearing your weather stripping. Something to do once a year, definitely coming into the fall. You know, PB Blaster for, you know, helping unfreeze bolts. I found that it works better than good old WD-40, which I use for other stuff, you know, just to kind of lube a bolt when it's going in, something like that. That's very valuable to keep around, especially if you're working on exhaust stuff. I'm lucky I no longer live in a rusty, you know, in a salt-laden state, or at least I don't live next to the coast either. So I don't run into a lot of rust problems with fasteners, but on exhaust stuff it does still happen, and I've found that this stuff works really well. Goes Good old WD-40 is handy as too. A couple other small things that I always keep around. I always keep some ceramic brake grease around. This is to make sure that the brake caliper and the brake pad don't squeak together and that the parts don't freeze up on brake calipers. Keep a little dielectric grease around, again, just to put onto things like spark plug connectors or wire connectors. Remember, the whole thing with dielectric grease is that it is not conductive, so make sure not to get this onto your contacts. Keep some black RTV around just for gaskets and things like that. Some copper anti-seize. Make sure to, it is really wise to make, when you're using this stuff, make sure to use it in conjunction with a torque wrench. That's the whole point. It's to make sure that you're able to torque things to the correct specification and be able to remove them later. Lastly, always keep a little bit of blue thread locker around. Blue thread locker purpose is that it's going to hold the fastener in place, but you will be able to remove it by hand, just by using hand tools, I should say. There's red thread locker out there. Red thread locker, the convention being that you would need to use an impact or power tool to remove it. You see some consistent brands, CRC, PB, Permatex. I'm really not brand loyal. I just wanted to kind of give you a taste of some of the types of chemicals, lubes, whatever that I keep available to me in my shop that I tend to call upon all the time. If you've got ideas of other things that you're always using, I'd love to see your recommendations in the comments.
So I'm going to cut the video there for today. I've got a bunch of automotive test kits and things like that I'm going to split out into a separate video because this one's already getting pretty long. So look for that in the future. If you found some value in this video today, please give it a thumbs up. If you've got any questions, comments, or recommendations, please make sure to drop them in the comments below. If you like this type of video and you've got some value and you want to get other videos in the future, please make sure to subscribe. And thanks a lot for watching. Stay safe in the shop, and we'll see you next time.